2015 regular meeting. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Neary, Councillor Vizelak. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes, October the 19th, 2015 special council meeting. They're real short.
Just
Sorry.
this one, I think there's a small correction. It says Councillor Gesselbrecht was absent.
I was just sleeping.
Yeah, I know you're sleeping, but you weren't absent.
Okay. Councillor Gesselbrecht, were you here?
I was here.
You were here. Okay. Anything further? Councillor Neary was there?
No, not on that one, no.
Yeah, it says in our in-camera
Yeah.
minutes that getting once presented there.
Okay, so if we could have a motion to approve as amended. Councillor Gesselbrecht, Councillor Neary, thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. October 19th, 2015 regular council meeting. Councillor Swain.
Yeah, just under the report from myself, I was reading through it and it said pork culture, and it took me by surprise. And so I kind of went back and it was horticulture. Yeah.
We need that sound system.
Yeah.
Whereabouts is that?
Under the reports from council, or verbal updates. There's that comment in there about horticulture, and I just
Culture.
really made me wonder, okay, what's that?
Port the shell place or port the liquor?
That's followed up by management of the invasive species.
Councillor Colcott.
On the top of agenda, page 7 of the agenda package, it says Councillor Neary moved and Councillor seconded.
Councillor who?
Yeah, I know. So.
That's
At the top.
Anybody recall who seconded that? There's video evidence.
There it is. Should we go to the tape?
I can't recall. Off the top of my head.
Might have been me.
Might have been you.
Good enough.
Councillor Colcott. Anything additional? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve as amended? Councillor Neary, seconded by Councillor Colcott. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Which gets us to presentations, delegations, and petitions. There's a variety of names there. Who's going to present? Mr. Digney. Dr. Digney, my apologies.
Okay.
And this is in regards to the Aspen Grove school tax exemption.
Mayor Haim, councillors, staff, and guests. My name is Drew Digney, and I'm the current chair of Aspen Grove School Board of Directors. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I will endeavor to keep everybody awake. So no worries there. I would like to take this time to address the issues brought forward by Mr. de Jong and the memorandum that is before you. It does seem to form some arguments to deny Aspen Grove a permissive exemption in the past. The memorandum actually provides a very well organized summary of those points, and I'd like to address each of those and use this as a bit of an educational opportunity to fill out the facts surrounding the comments and then conclude by suggesting perhaps a different viewpoint of Aspen Grove's place in the community, which I would argue is a better way forward for both Aspen Grove and Lansdale. So I'd like to start by thanking him for raising and recognizing a few key points. The first one is he does recognize the rights of parents to choice in education, which is really at the heart of the matter. Secondly, he recognizes the organization which has the scope to set and shape educational policy in Lansdale, which is the provincial legislature in Victoria. And thirdly, he mentions something I think is very important, and that's the Sullivan Commission. For those that don't know, the Sullivan Commission was a royal commission struck in 1988. And it's important to note this because it prepared a very comprehensive report entitled A Legacy for Learners, Report of the Royal Commission on Education to the Provincial Legislature. This was an extensive review, basically a complete overview of the educational system and provincial system here in BC, and it made a number of recommendations on a wide range of topics and services, and really is the basis of the present system that we all operate in. It's important to note, again, that it was a provincial review, since it is provincial legislatures that have the responsibility to manage educational policy and then delegate it to the various school districts. It's not federal parliament, and I may say not local councils. I'd like to share one of the summary paragraphs from this very lengthy report. And it says, simply put, the provincial system envisioned by the Commission should be marked by both loose and tight properties. It should accommodate the demand for diversity that exists in both the public and the non-public sectors. It should allow pupils, parents, and other participants in schooling the right to make educational choices and provide reasonable levels of resources for them to do so. It should at the same time seek to promote equality of opportunity and equality of educational access for all children to the extent that it is feasible. And it should, in the interest of children's welfare and the common good, monitor the levels of service delivered in efficient and effective ways. To this end, the Commission made a number of recommendations, including the partial funding of non-public institutions and essentially laying out the principles of fairness, equality, and choice for parents in British Columbia. So you might ask, that was 1988. Are these recommendations still relevant today? Well, in fact, again, the body responsible for our provincial educational policy released in 2010 a Ministry of Education overview of independent education in British Columbia. And again, a fairly long document. Some key points are that the government strongly supports a public system of education that provides a publicly funded quality education for all. However, it goes on to state, parents have the right to choose from various educational alternatives for the education of their children, such as distributed learning, homeschooling, and independent schools. It goes on to say, again, reaffirms the partial funding for independent schools to recognize the contributions these schools have made to the education of children in our province, and it increases the options for more parents to select schools of their choice. It then goes on to refer directly to the Sullivan Commission again, stating, we therefore deem it proper that non-public schools should continue to receive provincial financial assistance. Such aid we believe to be a normal, tangible manifestation of the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression guaranteed by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. To assume otherwise would be to deny accommodation of social diversity and multiculturalism, the recognition of individual differences, and the rights of parents to participate in educational choice, all principles which remain fundamental parts of the democratic system we hold dear. The vast majority of councils since 1980 have understood the importance of these principles and the human rights which underpin them, and perhaps set aside their own personal opinions and have granted the vast majority of educational organizations a permissive exemption. Anything else would be, I might argue, similar to denying a church a permissive exemption because you hold atheist religious views, or, worse yet, not exempting a mosque because you're a Christian. Prior Landsfield councils have unfortunately been a notable exception to this, and in part, I believe, are responsible for the recent changes enacted by the legislature. Now, I'd like to take on the issues mentioned in the memorandum, and there were 7. So the first one talks around the size of the property, and it's up to 40 acres. Comments on the standard school size being approximately 5 acres from ministry guidelines. We asked for a permissive exemption of 20, and then goes on about competition. So the memorandum is actually correct. The ministry guidelines for a public elementary school is a minimum of 5 acres. It doesn't mention the same minimum guidelines for a secondary school, which we also operate, which is 17 acres. The maximum school acreage is actually not mentioned in ministry guidelines, nor is it mentioned in the exemption legislation. In the independent schools branch, which actually oversees the operation of independent schools in BC, there are no guidelines at all. There are independent schools that operate full K-12 facilities on a city block, and schools operating grade 8 to 12 schools on 300 acres. We use 20 acres, which we have used for only what is permitted for in the zoning, and that is school use. Now, while it's correct we do have 40 acres in total, in 2006 we did rezone 20 for school use, and the other are still zoned residential. We do and should pay appropriate taxes on the residentially zoned land. It is the school zoned land which has been an issue. You may or may not know, but there is no property tax category for a school or other non-profit educational institution. This is because there is an assumption in the property tax classifications that schools will either get a statutory or permissive exemption. And this has been the case until recently, which is why when we talked to the assessment authority, they were quite surprised to hear that our permissive exemption was lost, and we contacted them to find out about why we're being taxed as a commercial enterprise, which is the only option they have available to them if you don't fit into one of the other categories. And since no schools up until that time had been taxed, they of course had no other classification to put us into, and so we're put into the property, put into the commercial, which is the highest zone we can have. The next point goes on, and I'll elucidate or go on a bit more about that in a minute. There's then, the next line is around the Landsville's public primary school, CVU, has 230 students and is under considerable pressure due to gradual erosion of enrollment. There's an aging community, lost 2% of the population, and the loss of any student to the private sector is problematic for the continuity of the existing public school. And then, although every council supported the freedom of choice, they also had to consider the needs of the community as a whole. I won't read all that out to you. Well, there has been a decrease in enrollment in the CVU school, but I don't believe it's related to Aspen Grove. In 2008, when we came on the Landsville property, the CVU enrollment, and this is taken from the BC government website, was 234 students. So while I agree there are 4 less students over the intervening 7 years, this decline was more likely due to an overall decline in the district, or perhaps parents choosing other educational options such as homeschooling, or even just a blip or a bad year. I don't really know the answer, but what I can tell you is that we keep careful records of where our students are coming from and where they're going to. And our admission director provided me with the following information. Over the last 14 years, not just since we've been here in Landsville, 12 students have transferred from CVU Elementary to Aspen Grove. Over the 14 years, we've also had 9 students transfer from Aspen Grove to CVU Elementary for a total of 3 difference over 14 years.
So what was that last number?
So it was 12 that way and 9 this way. And 3. 14 years. Now, she also pointed out to me that Landsville residents over the last 14 years, many of them did not come from CVU. In fact, most of them were families that had already chosen schools outside of the CVU catchment area before coming to Aspen Grove, and these included schools like Randerson Ridge or Wilhelm Bay or Montessori or some of the other options that are available. I also asked our admission director if at any time anyone from Landsville council or staff had contacted the school to gather data as part of any research, and advised they had not. The simple truth is a small decline in enrollment in CVU over the intervening 7 years can be attributed to any number of different reasons, and Aspen Grove's presence in the community is probably not a major contributor. The third point is under the current legislation, the permissive tax exemptions are elective, true, and are usually granted as a quid pro quo for the use of facilities by the community. And then goes on to say that our location was not readily accessible and that we charge fees. This argument is actually not correct. The permissive exemption was in place to provide equality and fairness in our educational system as previously outlined, not as a quid pro quo. Aspen Grove is actually pleased to provide our facilities for community use and not part of some deal or trade-off, but because it's actually the right or neighborly thing to do. With regard to charging for facility use, our policies provide our facilities to local organizations that provide the community a benefit at no cost. These have included, and not limited to, community disaster preparedness, a community lecture on brain health, a children's experience at BC Children's Hospital, the Children's Book Festival Planning Committee, and the Ladies Learning Code. And we, not unlike other schools in the area, or even Landsville Council for Coston Hall, charge a nominal fee to other users such as the BC Boys Choir, the Air Cadet League of Canada, and NIMO Multicultural Centre, etc. With regard to the comment that we're not accessible, I'm not sure how much more accessible we can be, since we are sited next to the walking and cycle paths which connect both upper and lower Landsville.
Sorry, Your Worship. Just following Section 20 sub B of the procedure bylaw, we need a motion at 2/3 of council to continue as per the delegation.
Okay, we had a motion at 2/3. Hang on. Is that moved?
Yeah.
Moved by, second by Councillor Colclough. Discussion.
I have a quick question.
Councillor Neary.
Do you have much longer to go?
5:10.
5:10?
5 to 10 minutes.
What's the limit?
I timed it.
Well, there's no outer limit. There's, in the procedure bylaw, there's mention of 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Speak quickly.
Not too quick.
Okay. With regard to the, I was saying about how accessible we are connected to all of the walking and cycle paths which connect upper and lower Landsville, and we're less than a kilometer from an intersection on the major 4-lane highway that travels directly through the community. Number 4, there's a comment on the memorandum then uses our use of municipal services and the number of students as a basis to determine tax-exempt status. Again, this argument doesn't really hold up. Our range of municipal services, offered to our members of the community, we provide our own water, we provide our own sewer, we have our own garbage pickup, and we plow our own parking, and usually plow the upper half of Clark Drive as we need the road open before the Landsville plows can actually reach us. The roadway was there before we opened, and we provided all the signage that's been put up on Clark Drive as a result of our opening. We've donated 3 acres of parkland. We provided a trail along Clark Drive. We've added numerous trails in our property, and of course are happy to have neighbors use them for their own recreation. To suggest that we're net takers is a bit unfair and not really based on facts. I have to ask if the same criteria has been applied to other organizations that have requested and received exemptions. For example, has the residency of the church congregation and those who use the E&N Trail or even Coston Hall, have they been calculated out to see who comes from Lanceville and who does not? And if not, then I'd have to ask why council is not being consistent with prior councils and what criteria it uses in making these determinations. The next point is regarding a 2014 Revenue Canada T3010, which outlines the school's assets and revenues. And I would suggest that the considerable research and substantiating data on this topic is also found lacking. If you look at an organization or even an individual and make a fiscal conclusion based on one side of the ledger, it's a bit unfair, based just on assets and revenues alone. If you buy $1 million house with a $50,000 down payment, does that make you a millionaire? Well, of course it doesn't. You have to include liabilities and the operating expenses before you can make a statement about whether an organization is well-funded or not. Unlike our public cousins, independent schools must provide everything, including the land, capital, and building costs at 100%. Therefore, on the liability side of the same Revenue T3010, you would see that our net assets, which is the assets minus liabilities, was minus $115,000. Now, I'm very pleased to say that in 2015, we now have positive net assets, just over the line. On the operating side, until recently, we've had to rely on private loans to support our cash flow from year to year, and only this year have our auditors removed an ongoing concern note for our yearly statements. Our over $3.7 million in operating expenses are mostly salaries and borrowing costs, and we are still working very, very hard to raise our staff salary grid to match that of the local district. We are actually proud of the fact that we have one of the lowest tuition structures in the province, as we are trying to be as accessible as we possibly can to our community. And in fact, we give even given these financial constraints, we provide over $350,000 in tuition bursaries. Our $3.7 million operating budget is about $500,000 short of the operating budget we believe is a base no-frills budget. To suggest based on one side of the ledger that we're well-funded is, I think, misleading at best. I also understand there's some questions regarding the ownership of the land, which is presently registered under a numbered company. The present school property was originally purchased by a consortium of parents who made up the numbered company. And at the time, the school was unable to secure loans. And when the land became available, these parents jointly got together and were able to purchase the land. We then leased it from them, and when the school was in a position to acquire the land, the advice we were given was simply to purchase the company, because the parents really didn't have any more need for it, rather than purchasing the land from the company, which is why you will find the ownership under that entity. There's then, I think, number 6 is talking around the statutory exemptions and the amount of money that's included in that. It's quite long, and I'll put it out to you. It's in front of you. And I found this a really tough one to comment, as it's really pretty far off the mark. And I'll just start with the math. So before the school land was rezoned, the total property taxes for both parcels was approximately $11,000. And as you well know, property taxes are made up of a number of pieces, one of which is a municipal component, which at that time was about $5,000 of the $11,000 for both parcels, or roughly $2,500 for the then school zone, or the to-be school zone land. Now, in order to open a school, we needed to rezone it to school use, which we did, and that was supported by council. Now, this would have resulted in a net decrease in the base for Lanceville of $2,500 if the appropriate exemption had been in place at the time. It wasn't, so the newly rezoned school portion was reclassified. And as I mentioned, this is when it gets kind of weird, because there is no classification for schools. It had to get put into commercial, and that's what caused a sudden spike in the taxes up to approximately that $25,000 mark. I would argue that rather than really a revenue loss, Lanceville has had a revenue windfall. And really, once the appropriate tax exemption is put in place, it then becomes approximately that 2.5, or I guess now it would be more like $4,000 loss. The memorandum then implies the previous council viewed property tax exemptions as financial investments and mentioned the difficulty of getting the money back, and then raises issues of capital gains, etc. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I just couldn't quite figure out the reasoning. Because by definition, a monetary investment is a process of investing money for financial gain. An exemption, which is what this would be, by definition, is a state of being free from an obligation or liability imposed on others. They're two entirely different things. and therefore the argument actually makes no sense. There's no recurring debt or obligation over any 50 years. The investment, because there's no investment there. You're free from the obligation. There's nothing incurring. It doesn't come up. Again, I have to ask in the interest of fairness, is the district keeping track of the other statutory and permissive exemptions that are granted so that one day in the future these investments can be recovered should the land change ownership or be rezoned? There's another comment around around how long independent schools last, and then a comment around the impact independent schools have on financial status of public schools. And the memorandum seems to imply that funds used to support independent schools will cripple or destroy the public system. The research from economists working for the Royal Commission reached an entirely different conclusion, and I'll quote, "Economic analysis provides no evidence to support the hypothesis that provincial support for independent schools has to date reduced the level of funding for public schools. Viewed in terms of the recent historical context in British Columbia and of the battles that have raged throughout the canyons of school finance, it is understandable that some members of the public and the education profession may feel that financial support for independent schooling threatens support for the public system. The evidence, however, does not bear this out." So to recap, I think I've explained pretty well that the data says that Aspen Grove does not sit on an unusually large parcel of land for an elementary and high school. It is not the reason for CP's gradual erosion and enrollment. It's accessible by foot and bicycle from much of upper and lower Lanceville as well as by car from the entire community. Fees are not routinely charged for all community groups for its use of facilities, nor is it a higher user of municipal services. It has liabilities as well as expenses, which, when taken into account, give the picture of a well-managed rather than well-funded organization. And lastly, tax exemptions are not financial investments to be recouped at some future date. So, the memo goes on to make some recommendations for amendments to the property tax exemptions, and these arguments are really more appropriate, as I've mentioned, in the provincial legislature, because that's the place where it goes. So, the discussion about tax exemptions is behind us, and so I'd now like to look at what is in front of us. Lanceville and Aspen Grove will always have a relationship. The choice is what kind of relationship that is going to be. I would suggest that if Council is rightly concerned about our community's tax base and growth, then a good strategy is to take full advantage of the fact that the school is in our community. The existence of a vibrant, independent school in a small community has been shown time and again to be an economic benefit to that community. While still small, the existence of Aspen Grove has already resulted in the creation of one new business and the purchase of two others that might not have otherwise stayed in the community. In one instance, this family moved from another country and chose to live and start their businesses here in Lanceville because of Aspen Grove and the IB education it offers. These families have contributed far more than the $2,500 or $5,000 lost revenue that may have been due to a rezoning. I call that an investment. One only has to look south to Mill Bay to have a strong visual of the benefits that an independent school in your community can have. Studies in Idaho, Oakville, Ontario, the Niagara region, and the United Kingdom have come to the same conclusions. I would like to try to share some kind of comparator to give you an idea of what having a school in your community can mean. And the best I could find as an objective comparator was a report from the MBA Business Consulting Group of Brock University, who reviewed the economic impact of Ridley College to St. Catharines, Ontario. Ridley is granted a bigger school. It's a 600-student school with boarding, and they found that induced more than $20 million in spending per year. It created more than $20 million in employment income per year and sustained approximately 363 full-time jobs in the area. In addition, the report outlined other non-fiscal spin-off benefits that the independent school created for its community, including the athletic and cultural facilities and compulsory community service activities by students. I'd just like to quote from the, if I can find it, from the CEO of St. Catharines Chamber of Commerce, who said, "Ridley College's impact on the community goes beyond the school's commitment to the highest quality education. Ridley is an important contributor to the overall economic well-being of Niagara. From the expansion of its facilities to the annual direct impact on employment and its business operations, Ridley College continues to be a valuable economic asset for the community." Aspen Grove is already the largest employer in Lanceville with 43 full-time staff. We have a policy of where available to buy goods and service locally, and we are presently in discussion with an architectural firm, and part of our requirements is that any future building or land use take into account the need to be accessible to the larger community. We have a community use agreement in our field, and I've already mentioned a number of other benefits to the Lanceville community. We try to be a good neighbor. Our volunteers do nearly yearly walks along Clark Drive and to all the surrounding homes, and we personally and directly check to see if there are any issues or questions. We plan one day on having proper sports field, gym space, performing arts facilities, and other amenities that we wish to share in a similar relationship to the one exemplified by Ridley and St. Catharines. A strong, internationally recognized independent school is one of the best tax revenue generators Lanceville could ever hope for. We'd like to change our conversation to be one that is forward-looking and finding mutual benefits that working together can bring to our community. And I will close with a paraphrased quote from our newly elected Prime Minister on his election night speech. "We are not your enemies. We are your neighbors." I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to extend an invitation for the new council to come and tour and show you around the other school in your community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Hain?
I got a few. Thank you very much. That was very informative, and actually I really enjoyed it. I learned some new things there tonight. A few questions. We've always based permissive tax exemptions on the fact what organizations have given to our community. And so the fields and the trails and the parks are available for all existing residents. Okay. I just got some random questions here. Is Aspen Grove a nonprofit corporation?
It's a nonprofit society.
Society, okay. Just to clear that
It's
up.
in the Central Inland Independent School Society.
Correct. Okay.
Comprehensive school.
Good. I have here a breakdown of the two folios, the two properties.
Okay.
And there's the one that is the class 6 and 8, which is where the school is, and a big chunk of that falls on the statutory exemption. And then the portion, a smaller part, is what we're talking about tonight, is the permissive. The other folio is
Residential.
fully taxed.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the portion that we're looking at tonight, because there's been discussion over the use, the 20 acres, how much of that is used for school activities, would you say? Parking lot?
Everything. I mean, the whole, we're stem to stern, so it goes right to the property line on each side. We've got the field, we've got the surrounding areas for the runoff that needs to be there. The kids that are riding bikes through there. We have a lot of extracurricular activities that are not available in other institutions. So there's a cross-country running club. There's a nature club where they go out and are collecting different samples of the different plants and animals that are out there. So, there's a lot actually when you see the collection that they've got. So we use that entire 20, and actually we use a little bit on the other side as well. But we are using the entire 20 acres.
Okay. Can I keep going? I got just a couple more.
How about if we transfer it to Councillor Gesver?
Okay.
I'm going to put this to, and maybe Councillor Hain, but I'm going to put this to staff. What is the dollar difference if we grant the permissive exemption as opposed to not granting it? Is that the $7,000?
Is this related to a question or something that's going to go to the delegation? Because
Yeah.
okay.
And what are we talking about? The $7,000?
5,000 is in the agenda.
$5,000.
Page 37.
All right. I don't buy some of the former Mayor DeYoung's arguments, with all respect to the former mayor. And yes, we've had a decrease in population. It's not due to Aspen Grove. It's due to the fact that we haven't had any water, or haven't captured the water, and we haven't had any development in Lanceville for 25 years, which is going to be remedied. So I don't buy that argument. Athletic fields. If John and I bring a U12 team over can we play Aspen Grove on their field?
Sure.
Do you encourage?
Well, no, not on our field right now. It needs a little work. So.
Okay.
There is a field available for you.
Oh, there is. Yeah. Oh, that one is. Sorry, there was a. Yeah.
And in fact, we were playing college football against.
Okay. So you encourage participation with the other public schools as well as with other clubs?
So I am not a parent in the school any longer.
Okay.
I think it was just the...
There's no prohibition.
No. We've actually just had an invitational on the school for all of the elementary schools to come to use our cross-country fields because we have the space available.
So when we get lights in, we can do it at night too.
There's regular intramural games, or intra-school games.
I'll just end with this, that although I don't believe in public funds funding non-public organizations, I think you and the other parents are to be commended in this community for setting up this school. And I think that when we get things rolling here in standstill in terms of development and water storage, that having a private school, and hopefully we call it a prestigious private school, that will be a magnet, such as Brentwood, such as St. Michael's, such as all these other schools that I've taken teams down to play rugby and soccer, that will be a magnet and a net increase for our lovely community here at Lansing. Would you agree with that?
I would totally. Well, it's not really me, but that's what the economic analysis, a number of communities have supported for sure. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not an economist.
Okay, further council questions for the delegation? Councillor Amy, a couple more?
Yeah, just two more. Can you confirm the myth about the double taxation? Private schools only receive 35% of the funding per pupil versus a public school?
The operating, yes, whatever the operating per pupil grant is here, we get 35% of that.
Right, so there's not an extra subsidy there to private schools.
No.
In
And that
fact,
can
you
only
pay the
be-
same as all of us. Just
Yeah, they can only be used for operating, so all of our mortgage costs, anything to do with land acquisition and building purchases, we cannot use those funds for that. It's purely for operating, so paying staff salaries. And
Right. Great. And my last one is, the province has given third reading with regards to making this all permissive or statutory in the future.
Yeah, the government has really upheld the Sullivan Commission reports by making statutory exemptions for all schools. It's passed third reading, and I would point out that it was supported unanimously by all three parties in the legislature, both the Liberals, the NDP, and the Green.
So getting the royal assent is just a matter of process. It doesn't really mean anything. It's pretty much a done deal. Is that
Yeah,
what
it
you're saying?
should be happening this week. As far as
Unless the government falls.
They can't. Yeah. Well, you know.
No, I don't know. From what my reading, it looks like it's usually about a week to 10 days after, and we're about that time frame. I passed third reading over about a week to 10 days.
Yes. Thank you. That was it.
Okay, anything further from council? Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Duggan.
you very much.
Okay, next item, correspondence from Jack DeYoung with respect to the permissive tax exemptions provided for information.
Move receipt.
Received, Councillor Hames, second by Councillor Colclough. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Mayor and council verbal updates. Councillor Colclough.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Hames.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Swain.
Well, I do have enough coming. Park and Rec Commission meeting in Nanaimo this Wednesday. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Neary. Councillor Coulson. Councillor Geselbrecht.
Another pass.
Good. For myself, nothing to report at this time. CAO's report October 2015 for information. So this is the first CAO report from our new administrator, Mr. McRae. Questions, comments from council? Otherwise, a motion to receive.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Colclough, second by Councillor Haim. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, governance facilitator RFQ. There's a motion previously with respect to direction of getting information on a governance workshop. And staff has provided us with a couple of potential options if we so choose. Just a question to staff. This was handed out. It's a copy of the minister's letter.
Yes, through your worship, it was my initial understanding that those documents were provided in the council package. However, at a late period, I was noted that they weren't. Given that this report makes reference to the minister's request, that way the language can be in front of council to be able to see that instead of making a guess at what the minister may or may not have said.
Okay. Okay. Council. If I might start on the minister's letter that was sent out dated May 26, 2015. Down the bottom of it, it has some comments with regards to my expectation is the council will implement a plan including obtaining independent professional assistance to address the issues that have resulted in councillor and staff resignations. Keep in mind that the minister themselves wrote this letter without having any sort of investigation, review, or otherwise as to what issues led to either staff and or council resignations. So in reality, that individual is writing that advice based on kind of guesses, if you might want to call it that, in that regard. In terms of the staff report itself and the recommendation in there of potentially spending up to $15,000 on this exercise, I really struggle with it based on the fact that, number one, a number of the people that were involved are now no longer here. So in order to address the issues that have resulted in council and staff resignations as suggested by the minister becomes infinitely difficult based on that sort of an aspect. There are other things on the plate of council, such as there's a suggestion of strategic planning that, in terms of my thoughts, in terms of allocation of funds, that should be the initial spending of funds as opposed to this exercise. I've looked through the two proposals, one by Tim Wood and the other one by Christina Benty, and some of them, when it comes to it, are kind of standard, what I would consider standard boilerplate type of an aspect, although Christina Benty's has certainly more customization with respect to identification of questions and that sort of thing that might need to be answered. But having said that, I still don't see how they address what the minister has suggested. And if I might suggest, some of the things, for example, like bring in a new administrator to review processes, etc., could be viewed as independent professional assistants in terms of addressing those issues. So that's my initial kind of spiel. Councillor Colclough.
Question to you.
Yeah.
I think in my opinion, we have two options. One is just not to make any motions, or put them on the table and defeat them.
There's a third option, technically, but
I said in my opinion.
I see.
I don't support spending $15,000 on this. And granted, the proposals are less than that, but I actually support your suggestion there that what we should be doing first is a new strategic plan.
Okay. Councillor Guzman.
Well, I think the recommendation is redundant. Council will implement a plan including obtaining independent professional assistance to address the issues. We did that. We had an election. August 2015. We addressed the issue. We've got all new people. We're all talking. I see smiles around the table. There's obviously issues we do not agree on, but we've got a new pair of shoes, and I, like Councilman Colclough, think we should just move on and onward and upward.
Other Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm conflicted here because I agree wholeheartedly that strategic planning is a critical piece for this council to address as we come together as a group and start to think about what our purpose is and what kind of strategic direction we want to take. But at the same time, I do believe that any kind of proposal of this nature has huge value for a group that is coming together under difficult circumstances. Additionally, we have a completely new team, or will have a completely new team of senior administrative staff. So you've got two pieces going on. You've got an organisation that has been through a huge shake-up. However which way you look at it, it's been completely turned over. And I think this is an ideal opportunity for us to do some work. A one-day workshop doesn't amount to a great deal, but I think we do need to do the work that brings us to a place where we can function as a cohesive group. And I think given the fact that our staff are new to the district and we've got a majority of council that are new to this table, I think it's very important and a valuable exercise to undergo. I'm wondering about the possibility and the viability of maybe combining a workshop of this nature with strategic planning session. I think we do need a complete strategic planning session. I'm not sure whether it's feasible to do it all in one go, all in one day. But I, for one, I am reluctant to abandon the idea of this kind of organisational development workshop. I think it's critical.
Councillor Colcott.
I was thinking along similar lines of having the first part of the strategic planning exercise being on governance and roles, responsibilities of council members, mayors, staff, etc.
And historically, in the past, that has occurred at times. There's been some of the consultants that we've brought in the past where, if you want to kind of break it down, there's a morning spent on kind of who we are generally, as opposed to specific to what are you going to do with water, what are you going to do with trails, that sort of an aspect. So it has been done, certainly. Councillor Coulson.
I had a very different page of notes than what I'm going to talk about now. I'm encouraged by some of the comments made by yourself, Councillor Gesselbach, and Councillor Colclough. 15 grand is a tremendous amount of money to spend on this exercise. And I hate the term governance. I never knew what it meant till I joined this gig. And
What does it mean?
I still can't tell you. Maybe I should take the workshop. But we've gone from obtaining independent professional assistance to a governance workshop. And what troubles me there is, will that solve whatever issues were lingering or whatever concerns there was? To me, governance is a meaningless term other than structural relationships. If you go to core issues, it's about relationships, functioning in a group, not just in this environment, but any environment. We don't need to spend $15,000 for training on that. There's way cheaper options if that's something we're interested in. We had talked about another solution that was $2,500, but that one's died on the vine. I won't talk any more on that one, but there's cheaper options out there. Your comments on the people have left. We've had a huge shake-up in things. 2-3 new staff members coming, a big changeover in the council. Why don't we just let this rest for a little bit, see what happens? Again, spending that kind of money on something premature, waste of money in my opinion, and I don't support it. But anyways, I'll stop talking.
Okay. Anything further from council? Councillor Neer.
Thank you. I think cost is one issue, and if council is not satisfied with the cost of the 2 quotations that have been received, I think that's a different discussion altogether. However, on September 14th, 2015, council directed staff to issue an RFQ, the services of a good governance facilitator, to organise and deliver a council good governance workshop, and further that staff provides a report to council on the results of the RFQ, which indicates to me that on September 14th, council was quite committed to the idea of conducting and taking part in a governance workshop. Governance is what we do. Governance is what a council does. It governs. It governs locally on a very small scale in Lantsville, but nevertheless, that is what we do. And if you don't know what your governance model is, or how you're going to go about doing that as a cohesive group, then very often you don't get a lot done that is very constructive. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, I think it's very important that we as a group commit to this kind of exercise in order to find our level and bring those relationships together. Start them off on a good foot so that everybody knows where we stand, what we stand for, and how we're going to go about doing our business as a council. That's the whole point of this workshop, in my estimation. That was my understanding. I was actually not a part of the council motion that's down here because unfortunately I was not at that meeting, but I support it wholeheartedly. If cost is an issue, then we need to direct staff to find a cheaper version. something that's less expensive or less onerous that we can live with. But that's where I stand. I think we do need to incorporate this kind of workshop, even if it's within a strategic planning workshop.
Councillor Hain.
My recollection of the September 14th wasn't so much as to concentrating specifically on a governance workshop. Maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly. I think ever since we've been incorporated, we've always started every new council with a strategic planning workshop. I have no problem with that. It's a new council. Let's have a strategic planning workshop. We could throw some governance work in there. I have no problem with that. To spend $15,000 just on talking about relationships, I can't support that. Like you said, we've got pretty much a whole new group here. We had no specific issues identified that we're looking at for relationships to begin with. So, I would rather put that money to good use. And like Councillor Gesselberg said, let's identify what our priorities are, what we want to do, and let's get to work. Let's not keep spending money on the stuff that goes around and around. I just, this is more time. Let's just get at it.
Okay, Council, what is it we would like to do? Actually, I'll make two comments. Councillor Neary, when we made that motion back on September the 14th, one of the things as well from my standpoint would have been to see what kind of content is in the specific workshop. And there is some difference between the two consultants and what it is that they're proposing. And so it wasn't just a cost issue per se, it's also the content side of things. The second part is that the minister's letter dated May the 26th actually feeds from the letter of May the 11th from the Inspector of Municipalities, and this was before the number of people here were still more at that time. So the ability to fully understand the issues that are causing the problems and finding mutually acceptable ways to resolve those problems was more of a possibility at the time that letter was written. The minister then just basically did a cut and paste of a paragraph and re-quoted it in her letter of May the 26th. So again, the recommendations that are made at that time may or may not be possibilities at the time that the minister wrote that letter. And as I said, from my standpoint, the idea of the independent professional assistance also includes, in my mind, the CAO in that respect. But certainly the idea of a combined strategic planning with some governance aspect, also recognizing some individuals have never been on a council before. So when it comes to the definition of that, the identification of that, and the expectations of that, certainly if there's some sort of a combination, that would work well for me. Councillor Coulson.
I'll also throw in all of the LGLA presentations on the Lanceville 411 website, and it's got the Governance 101 presentation.
LG.
Local Government Leadership Academy.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can send it your way.
Okay. So where we're at basically is if there's a motion to retain one of these individuals, we can just do a motion to receive the staff report. We can provide additional direction to staff. It's council's will.
Move to receipt of the report.
By Councillor Colclough, seconded by Councillor Gesselberg. Any discussion on the receipt? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Is there any follow-up? Councillor Colclough.
I move that staff prepare and issue a request for proposals for a consultant to undertake a strategic planning exercise for council, including at the start a session on governance.
Okay, we have a seconder for that motion. Seconded by Councillor Gesselberg. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Coulson.
How long of a session do you see that being? An hour, a day?
Good question.
That's part of the job of the consultant.
Just curious, because I believe the last strategic plan session we had, 2 days, $5,000.
I don't know the cost. Was it 2 days?
Yeah, so about $2,500 a day. So
keep in mind that includes prep time and that sort of thing. And a consultant, if they're unfamiliar with the district, will spend time with staff familiarizing himself with the operation so that when we do get together having that strategic plan, they're not a blank wall.
But if we tack on a day of governance, we can very loosely get an inference of cost from that, or if it's an hour or so, it's almost rolled in for negligible costs.
Understood. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Gisborne.
I guess this is a question to Councillor Colclough. Does it need to be professionally guided as strategic, what are you calling it, strategic planning day? Does it need to be some outside person doing it? My understanding is that we have a large strategic plan that was from the last council, but it's not our strategic plan.
That's right.
And we really need to sit down and do that. And is it impossible for us to talk about governance and what it means to us and maybe come to a common understanding of that, sitting down around the table without a third party there doing it? I mean, we have lots of qualified people, such as Councillor Neary has been, but those are questions, maybe just further questions that I have.
Mr. McRae.
So I guess I'll jump in if I'm allowed to, Your Worship. The concern of not having an impartial body is just that. For instance, if Councillor Neary to do that, there's particular inherent bias that may occur. If the CAO is doing it, the CAO may or may not have his or her own opinions or bias in according to which way the district should go. The facilitator is able to come in and take an objective, fact-based analysis of what has gone on, is able to talk to council where there is no perceived bias, coming back and forth, is able to talk to staff with no perceived bias, and is able to give a guided fact-based analysis of where we need to go. In regards to the governance piece, that also gives the facilitator the ability to work through very much explaining what the role of governance is and what council's role is within governance.
And if I might say, when it comes to a strategic planning session, it's also meant to include senior staff in that as well. And so if they're trying to lead a session and participate, it does become more difficult. So it leaves staff open to freely participate in that.
But
Yep.
once again, isn't that what it's all about, the give and take between staff and council and what our priorities are? I've sat in mediations where the third party comes in, and often you hear them talking more than us talking. I think it's important we talk and sit down and say, here's our priorities A, B, and C, and if you disagree with it, why do you think 1 should be 3 and 3 should be 1? And by the way, we could throw in some governance for John there to confuse him some.
We'll go for the definition first. Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Colclough and then Councillor Coulson.
I just think we'll get more done in a shorter amount of time if we have a facilitator there. I've been involved in a number of different strategic planning exercises with different organizations, government and non-government, and I certainly think it's beneficial to have somebody to keep us on track and keep us moving forward.
Councillor Coulson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, through Worship,
Mr.
just
McRae.
to confirm the mover and the seconder for the newest motion.
I had Colclough and
There was a second. Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
And for clarity, was the council instruct staff to issue a RFQ to retain a consultant to undertake a strategic planning workshop, including a session on governance at the beginning?
Yep.
Councillor Coulson.
No, sorry, I got asked. So if we go back to the other entity we were dealing with, there was no terms of reference. That was part of the problem. Here too, what is the terms of reference going to be for what they're providing? Right, when you go for a quote, you have to spell out what you're asking for. So we want something on governance. Again, is it a 1-hour session, a day-long session? Who's going to put the limits or bounds around what that is?
Mr. McRae.
That would be myself, Your Worship. The administrator is to develop a governance and strategic planning session based on good governance principles. Therefore, we set up key metrics in regards to what this council needs to work on, what the strategic plan, how the process goes. In saying that, it is up to council to determine the direction of the municipality and staff to do the operations. So council will set the policy or set the procedures that come through the strategic plan. The framework will be there by the facilitator in regards to what part of the goalpost they act upon, but it's up to the council to determine which way it goes.
Councillor Coulson?
Could we put a dollar number on that then to provide some cap on how much we?
Councillor Colclough, is your motion, so.
I was going to suggest 2 days max. And it all encompassing, so my expectation would be to do the whole thing in the 2 days, and just from my experience, the governance aspects would be a couple hours at the beginning. Max.
Quit your job, Mark.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Neary.
Thank you. I will support this motion because it's obviously, it seems as if the consensus is that that's the direction we need to go in. I would just caution that when the idea that a good governance workshop has no value or has little value, or we don't really know what governance means, or we give staff direction to do one thing and then completely do a 360 when the request is fulfilled, I would suggest that a governance workshop will be money well spent.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carried. Gets us to item 8A, bylaw number 119. It's the property tax exemption bylaw, and note that we don't need a mover or seconder because the motion itself was made, and I do believe a recorded vote was requested.
So we don't have to read that council adopt?
Basically we're just,
Still there?
as long as everybody's aware of the motion itself, which is the adoption of 2016 property tax exemption bylaw 119, 2015.
And I just want to clarify that we had had some questions about council considering adoption and whether there was a desire to rescind third and give it an amended third. So if there was an intent to do that, it would be helpful if at this point council withdrew the motion on the floor and then made a motion to give third reading as amended. So those are your two options, to vote on this as an adoption or to withdraw this motion to give a third reading as amended. And then we would need to schedule a special meeting for consideration of adoption.
So does that mean that I need to read this, or is it on the floor right now?
Technically, the motion is on the floor.
Okay.
Correct.
So are we discussing it?
That's where we go back to.
Okay.
Councillor
Yes,
Olson.
sorry, next open question. So at the last meeting, I made reference to Bill 29 and around the reasonably necessary language that's in there. So we put a question to the staff on, I thought that might be in the development plan or permit, the percentage utilized of that 120-acre parcel, how much was used for school purposes. So if I can pass that through to staff to see if there was any feedback from, I think it was the RDN you mentioned you might talk to.
Through your worship, the difficulty with this piece is where it comes into the total acres used. Council has the ability to call whatever they would like for permissive tax exemption at that piece. Our bylaw states from the zoning bylaw that school use means any location where a body of students is organized as a unit for educational purposes under the supervision of a principal, vice principal, or director of instruction, and includes teachers, other members, and facilities associated with the unit, and includes municipal community use, but specifically excludes living accommodations for students.
There's your technical definition.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have a percentage?
I would suggest that, well, depending on how you interpret the use side, that reading that's there didn't specifically limit it to buildings and parking lots, etc. It also had the section and including municipal community use, which makes it beyond that in that respect, or could be interpreted as beyond that. So trying to identify a percentage per se is difficult, and as Dr. Digney expressed, they have other uses for those pieces of property.
Okay.
Councillor Gesbrecht, Councillor Hain.
Here's a legal question. This bylaw refers to section 224 of the community charter, permissive exemptions. And my question is, which section of section 224 is it? Because when we look at the statutory exemptions, clearly it's the one that refers to schools. And it says an actual occupation by the institution and holding in use for the purpose of giving the instruction. So it gives you some definition, and that's 221, 220, pardon me, sub 1, sub L. I take it you don't have any fruit trees on the property, which is sub L. But under section 224, the only one I could really see that might pertain to this is subsection, is 224 sub 2 sub F sub 1 in relation to property that is exempt under section 220 sub 1. No, that's it. That isn't it. That's public worship. So I'm at a loss which section it refers to.
Mr. McRae.
Your worship, and I'm debating law with a federal prosecutor. This should be fun. Looking at
There's a reason he's not still federal prosecutor.
Looking through the community charter, section 224, sub 2, sub H, in relation to property that is exempt under section 221, seniors' homes, hospitals, or private schools, and any area of land surrounding the exempt buildings.
So it pertains to this thread. It's not a question, it's a statement.
Okay.
Yeah, so
We're going to clarify.
Yeah, Bill 29, the language in that says section 221L of the community charter is repealed and the following substituted. So the language of that bill replaces what we're just going through.
Right.
Does that answer your question there, Councillor Geselbrecht?
And there's amendments to 224 as well.
Okay. Any follow-up? Oh, sorry, Mr. McRae.
Sorry, I just have to refer council, as much as we'd like to use the phrase rubber stamp on this one, it is in third reading, it is not law yet, and we need to just be cognizant of that we're providing evidence and information based on the legislation and laws we have in front of us. So for staff to go out on a limb and say that this is the way would be a bit presumptuous, even though it is at the 11th hour, 59th minute. We want to make sure that we give the legal definition to this council.
And certainly the language in Bill 29 is intended to replace the section that the CAO is referenced to.
But it has not replaced
But
it
it
yet.
has not yet. And the wording in Bill 29 is that it takes effect on royal assent.
Okay. Councillor Geselbrecht.
I came to this meeting prepared to vote against this exemption. And because in general, I don't believe we should be using public funds for private institutions, even though we have other exemptions here. But from Dr. Digny's presentation, and we don't have any relationship, I don't have any kids at Aspen Grove, my wife doesn't teach there, so no connection whatsoever. I do ride the bike path by there. What resonated with me is that opening a new dialogue with an institution in our community. If we want further taxes, there's lots of other ways to do it. Ex-Councillor Savage has pointed out many times, we've got an industrial park that if we passed the right bylaws and rezoned it, we'd have a lot of revenue coming from that. If we have Americans coming in, we expand the tax base, we're going to have a lot of taxes. But what resonated with me is that we have a private school that offers a different program that is an attraction to people who might not otherwise come to this area, and it draws them in. And I'm not saying that the private school is better than the public school, because my daughter went to the public school and it was good, and I wish we had more people there, but we're going to be bringing more people into the area. So I think that's a very poignant argument, that you have something that you can offer that other communities can't. And that in itself, plus the number of staff, that is going to be a net benefit to the community. And on that basis, and I realize I'm going to have detractors and I'll get the emails tomorrow, but for me, that's important. And I think as we're moving ahead in this community, we need to look at that. And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into a school like this. I know many parents who have ponied up the money and send their kids there, all the kudos to them. That's good. I will be voting in favor.
Councillor Hayman?
I also will be voting in favor. The basis of our permissive tax exemptions have always been, and if you review the list of those that are getting it, to those organizations in the community that give back to the community. They help to provide something. We have a number on here that are not private or owned by the district, the Legion, St. Philip's Church itself, the land itself, we give a permissive exemption to. It's not statutory. The Island Corridor Foundation. So there's a long list, but we already set that precedent. These organizations give back to the community, and for that we give them this permissive tax exemption. I think Aspen Grove has demonstrated over many years that they give a lot to this community. I think we have to start being more working together and more inclusive so that we can move the community forward in a positive way. The biggest issue is yes, we're at the 11th hour and 59th minute, but I think most of us believe the province is going to give it royal assent. So what are the implications for our budgeting? Because if we say we're not going to give it to them and then they get them, we're going to get it, and then we're obviously going to have to pay back any taxes they pay us.
Do we have enough money?
Well, we have to budget for it, and how do you budget for something like that? It gets very confusing, and I think it represents not goodwill. So for me, I think we just need to put this behind us. It's sort of taken out of our hands as we move forward, and let's just work as a community.
Councillor Colclough.
It's all been said.
Okay. Councillor Neri.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship, through you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be supporting this bylaw because of this amendment. It is the 11th hour, probably the 59th minute, as CEO McCrae points out. But for me, it is a political stance. I'd like to thank Dr. Digney for his presentation. You were so thorough, and I don't take issue with many of the points that were made. It's obvious that Aspen Grove is very community-minded. I'm sure there are economic spin-offs as a result of having the school in our community, and I absolutely respect the right to freedom of choice. However, just on principle, on this little window of opportunity, next year this will probably be a moot point because it will be a statutory exemption and it will go ahead regardless. But while I have the opportunity to stand on my principle, I will do so. I don't think that independent schools should be supported in this manner through the public purse. When I no longer have a choice in that matter, I will accept that and move on. And I have no ill will towards the school or anyone who chooses to take advantage of the services and the programs that the school offers. I have no question that the quality of the education that kids receive at that establishment is probably excellent. But as I said, from a political point of view, I'm sorry, I can't support it at this point.
Councillor Swain.
Just a few quick points. So, I think the doors at Aspen Grove are already open to their public. So it's one of these things that I think that's really, it's not even really a discussion point because I don't think the doors were ever closed. I do believe Aspen Grove does put Lanceville on the map. And when you talk to people about Lanceville that don't live here, they don't really know where Lanceville is. But I think there is something that does put our community on the map, and it definitely is Aspen Grove. I think there definitely is value to our community, and really what we have to ask ourselves at what cost is this, come to our community. So I've done some quick math, and basically to each resident in Lanceville, it's about $1.66 per annum. And per household, it's about $3.89 per annum. So, it's a pretty small cost, and I'm happy shelling that out to put our community on the map. For the students, if we flip it around, what does that mean to them? Well, it's $23.92 per year, and that's when it gets political. And should we be funding the private school system through public dollars? It's really just a balance, and in my opinion, I will be supporting this initiative. So that's it.
Anything further from council members? For myself, this is coming on a number of times over the years, and if we go right back to the very beginning, when we went through the initial discussion about tax exemption years ago, for me, it was about the working together, but also about the give and take. There had to be some sort of benefit to the community in order for a tax exemption. And I did the same thing with regards to the Island Corridor Foundation. Until such time as we had access through a trail on the Island Corridor Foundation, I was not in favor of the tax exemption related to them. With Aspen Grove, that community use agreement, the access, the trails, the fields, which are there for public accessibility in there, to me are important. The size of the property itself, even something, if you look on a map, there's a pond there that in reality is a water collection pond. It's not a pond directly, it's because of the slope of the land. Well, you put buildings, it causes runoff, you need a pond in that respect. So when it comes to the actual area used for school purposes, very narrowly defined, roads, buildings, etc., but more broadly defined is it's an integral property, and therefore from that standpoint, to me, the whole collective property is what's important. So for me, I'll be supporting it, but like I said, it's because of that working together, the give and take, the compromise that comes out as a result of it. And then moving forward, other initiatives, other renewals that happen on the property are something that the broader Lanceville community will be able to get the benefit and the use of as well. Councillor Gisbert.
Make sure you take the bullfrogs out of the pond.
Right up this summer, so they're gone.
And secondly, I want to state publicly, I want to thank ex-mayor DeYoung for providing the point and counterpoint for his view, because it's always important to have those viewpoints before council so that we can debate them in a lively spirit and see what the merits are of both sides, because it's very, very important. And so I just want to make sure that he knows that his contribution is valuable.
Okay, anything further? Councillor Coulson.
Question. So the bylaw 91, which is the Island Corridor Foundation grant, that's completely separate to this tonight, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm talking about that. So how do we talk about that one? That was the 10-year one, $60,000 per year.
That's the 10-year one. Separate discussion. There would have to be consider whether or not it be and the implications of potentially changing it if that was the will.
To be done,
but it's a separate discussion from this bylaw.
Okay.
Any further on the adoption of exemption bylaw number 119? And I do believe originally a recorded vote was requested. So all those in favor? Councillor Gisbert, Councillor Coulson, Mayor Hain, Councillor Kolkoff, Councillor Hain, and Councillor Swain. Opposed? Councillor Neary, motion carried. So that moves us on to item 9A regarding motions and notice of motions, and Councillor Coulson has the floor. So it's your first one there.
Yep. So I just read it out, and
If that's what you would like to do, certainly.
I move where the core service efficiency review was identified as a priority in the 2015 strategic plan, and whereas service reviews can be utilized to improve an organization's efficiency and effectiveness and assist in financial sustainability. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests the Chief Administrator Officer conduct core service / efficiency review of the organization, and that council requests the chief administrative officer include, in addition to the core service efficiency review, a detailed forecast for staffing for the next 5 years and a staff service delivery model based on a 15% reduction in the municipal budget.
Seconder for that motion.
I'll second it for discussion.
Seconded by Councillor Hain. Councillor Coulson.
So we had a email volley on this one, but I think this is a worthy exercise to undertake. In general terms, a service review is a good exercise for any organization to go through once in a while. We've been a municipality for 12 years. I think it's a good time. We have a new CEO arriving who's undoubtedly going through some of these exercises already as he figures out what the organization is about and so forth. So I think it's a good time for that. In terms of the second item for the staffing model, I think that's a nice piece of information to have in front of us. As we bring in our strategic planning session and stuff, just clarify the number of bodies we see having in front of us for a given level of service delivery. And the third thing regarding the 15% reduction, that's a ballpark number I have in my head for businesses that are going into a recessionary phase of their business cycle. And in my head, to me, that is an exercise to go through to have some balanced thinking in this environment. When we go through our budget cycle, the debate usually seems to be about what we will spend money on and what level of tax increase will be acceptable to residents. I'd like to see a bit of balance to that. What if services were cut back? What are the implications for that? What are the savings for that? Is there a tax savings, or can we boost our reserves and so forth from that? Just be an exercise to get some balance to our thinking on how we plan finances going forward and what that looks like, and get it out to the residents for comment.
Okay. Other council members. Councillor Hain.
This was a strategic priority from the previous council, and it may change once we have the new council's strategic priority. But just a couple of things to keep in mind, and why I'm supporting this is to me it's just sort of a beginning to look at a core review. And the reasons I support this is, we had a $280,000 surplus come out of 2014. Like, that just seems so unbelievable that we need to look at that sort of stuff, get in greater detail. One, we've had our staffing levels from 2007 to 2015 go from just over $500,000 in 2007 to we're now paying over $1 million for wages in 2015. And we really haven't changed anything here. Like, the numbers have escalated, and it'd be nice to find out why. What is causing these significant increases? It was 3,600 people in 2007, and it's 3,604 or less than 4 in 2015, and yet we've seen this phenomenal increase in wages. Like, the new council members, when you start to look at these numbers, I'm sure you're going to be wondering why. I think most of us had in our platforms fiscal responsibility and being accountable and getting best value out of every tax dollar. And this is the sort of stuff I think we need to do. It's time for that mid-term, or whatever you call it, checkup, because things are growing and getting out of control. And, I think we need to sit back and look and try to figure out why, so our dollars are getting used in a better way, because I don't think we're getting the best value for them right now.
Okay. Further discussion. Councillor Swain.
Yeah, I'm also in support of reviewing staffing. That's definitely one of the things in my platform. With the 15%, I know that's just a number. What concerns me there is, we are ramping up for growth. And if we're ramping up for growth, are we going to be cutting, or should we be aiming at maybe 0% increase? I don't know what the numbers are, but that is a concern. We want to get development going, and so we're going to start cutting. It doesn't make sense. But again, I think I'm in total support of reviewing of staffing and where things are at.
Councillor Neary?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Through you. In principle, I support the idea of reviewing staffing costs, what's known as a core service or efficiency review. However, at this point, and based on this particular motion, I can't support it as it's presented. I think this should be part of the upcoming strategic planning session. I think that's already been pointed out that this may emerge as a very high priority out of that session, or it may not. It may be a priority, but it's not right at the top of the list. I am really not comfortable at this point asking staff to go through this kind of very thorough exercise to produce a hypothetical budget. I find that really difficult to justify. This is not beginning to look at. This is quite clear. This motion is very clear that it is to be a core review. And one assumes if Council directs staff to conduct such a review, we expect a very thorough report. Additionally, this is asking for a detailed forecast for the next 5 years based on the staff service delivery model of a 15% reduction, which is an arbitrary number. I can't imagine why we would ask for a 15%, an example, a hypothetical budget reduced by 15%. I mean, that seems excessive to me when you consider the size of the municipality. And I can't speak to the increases over the years in staffing costs, but 15% of our staffing costs or 15% of our staff could very well add up to 2 or 3 positions or more just on staffing alone. So I'm just totally uncomfortable with the idea of sending staff away to do this kind of detailed, in-depth work on a hypothetical premise. What if? I think if we put this as a priority in the strategic plan, then obviously that's because there's consensus that it is a very high priority and that's what we need to be doing. And we can perhaps give some more detailed terms of reference about what we want to get out of it and to what degree we want staff to do the review. But short of referring this to the strategic planning session, I don't support it, and I would actually not move to do so, because I think it will come up in the strategic planning workshop anyway. So I would prefer to deal with it then, and then we can have a much more thorough, in-depth discussion about what this means and just how high a priority it is for Lanceville at the moment. It isn't a huge priority for me right now. I think that CEO McRae is no doubt already evaluating and reviewing as part of his new mandate here and to get a grasp on what's going on in the district and how things are operating. So to ask for anything more in depth, I feel is not a redundant exercise, but I just find it difficult to justify.
Councillor Coco?
I concur with all of Councillor Neary's comments there, and as stated in the CAO's report there, he is doing that. What I would like to see, I think it is premature, particularly around us now talking about doing our own strategic plan. One component of which I would like to see would be a summary of the services and the staffing and the costs, so that we can have that information going into the strategic plan.
Okay. Councillor Swain.
Yeah, I'm along the same mind. We need to have an analysis of what has happened over the last bunch of years and why we've had this huge increase in wages. I think that'd be very helpful going into any strategic planning session. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Coco?
I just want to be clear, I don't support the motion. What I'm saying is I would just like to see at the beginning of the strategic plan the summary of what it is, and that could include going back 5 years to show what's changed over the last 5 years, which would help us maybe look to the future. So.
Okay. Councillor Coulson?
Just want to clarify a couple points in the motion. So the staffing plan for the next 5 years, that's completely decoupled from the 15% reduction. That's my intent there is that we have a snapshot of like current conditions, looking forward for 5 years with whatever's potentially coming down the pipe. What will it look like? The 15% number, that didn't have to be limited just to staffing reductions. That could be services, contracted services, what have you. 15% budget reduction. And the third point, the 15% number actually wasn't totally without basis. Read a lot of 10K reports from U.S. corporations, any of them that are entering a downward turn in their cycle, if they want to get ahead of bleeding cash, 15% isn't an uncommon number for reductions in some fashion. So that's where that came from.
Okay, Councillor Colclough.
Responding to that, I don't see how you can ask the CAO to project staffing levels for the next 5 years when we haven't done the strategic plan. To indicate to him where we want to go.
And that's where I struggle. When it comes down to it, the idea of a core service review or an efficiency review and that sort of thing certainly was one of the items that I would expect just naturally a new CAO to do. This formalizes that request from council, okay, effectively, and therefore would require some form of a report back to council of the results of that sort of thing. But the second part I struggle with because of, for want of a better way to say it, the narrowness of it. The detailed forecast for staffing is so dependent on where we want to go that it's kind of throwing mud, seeing what sticks to a certain extent, because of the aspect that you're asking staff to guess with regards to development levels, servicing levels, those sorts of things. Well, that's set more or less here first, and then it funnels down to there. I was kind of toying with the idea of, okay, is there a way to amend this sort of an aspect? And the only thing I kind of came up with is in this last part is, again, more some direction to staff with regards to the CAO and Director of Finance, identifying opportunities to reduce current expenditures and or taxation rates. But then I have to qualify it and say, in conjunction with the outcome of the strategic plan session, which gets us back to that strategic plan again. So I kind of went full circle.
I understand that, but the strategic plan session doesn't fix or finalize anything. It's just another pulling of council as to what path we may go. So I don't see this being like a 20-page summary of stuff. It's a snapshot of where we are, how many bodies we have, what services we offer. If Foothills goes ahead, that means one planner, one fire chief, what have you. If Foothills plus projects goes ahead, it means this. If nothing goes ahead, it looks like our current level. We have nothing on paper to reflect a path forward, or even where we are now, really. We know what bodies we have, we roughly know what services we offer, but there's nothing really on paper that a resident could come and look at and understand what they get for their money. Or carry that forward where we might be headed based on what their voted councillors are suggesting in the strategic plan session. So yeah, the presentation could use changing, sure, I'm recognizing that, but I guess I haven't done a good job presenting it, but it's the intent of getting that on paper for discussion points.
Okay. Councillor Hinge.
Just a question. Would Councillor Coulson be receptive to deferring this until after the strategic planning workshop?
When is the strategic plan workshop?
That's the CAO.
Haven't you got him on the phone already there, Brad?
Well, Your Worship, I've already scheduled it. It's okay. If you want to be serious for a second, yeah, that's really all dependent on how quickly we're able to move on figuring out the scope of the workshop and the strategic priorities piece. Also, given that I've been given the parameters from what I've generally heard from council of maximum a half day of governance, the rest is on strategic planning. It gives me a bit of a guideline to go back to the people that already offer services and probably move on it quicker than I normally would because I just went through this exercise. One has to be cognizant of what time of the year it is. we could be
Halloween?
Yes, they don't like to come out at night. So it could be, quite frankly, if I can't get it scheduled within the next 6 weeks, and given council's giving me an RFP instead of an RFQ, I can move on that and provide a proposal to council quickly. We may be able to get somebody here mid-November if their availability is there. If we find a suitable facilitator and the availability. After that, it wouldn't be till the new year.
Because some of it's determining these operations, and we discussed this last year. We were having a strategic plan session basically as we started budget discussions. And so we were tripping over ourselves in that regard. This year, we had talked about maybe starting the budget discussions in September and moving through that. So it doesn't appear that we might improve on our timing for this cycle. Some of this information would have been quite beneficial, I think, to have in front of us for strategic planning and for definitely our budgeting process.
Okay. Councillor Cole.
I like your idea. I think that if we can go into the strategic planning session with the snapshot or the history of the last 5 years, here's what we've been doing as far as services go on our staffing levels and everything else the last 5 years, that becomes a very important part of sitting down and looking at what we want to do in the future. And it might be that we can't keep doing that, or we want to do something different, and that's going to change going forward. So it's very valuable information to have that history. But I think until we then sit down and use that and decide what it is, or what our priorities are going forward, that deferring it till after the strategic plan would make much more sense to me.
Do note that it's not required to be the mover of the motion that defers. So what would council like to do? We have a motion on the table. We do use Councillor Colclough. We have some options as to what we do with it. Actually, go Councillor Coulson first, if I could.
Sorry. I was going to ask if staff has a rough timeline of what it would take to do the core service part. And I know we haven't defined the other two very well, but a rough timeline of how much time you would need to prepare this.
Through your worship, as a CO, I've been sitting here trying to rack my brain, and what I look at is the parameters in regards to what I'm being asked, as Councillor Wilson's alluded to, aren't really set. So looking for how in-depth a core service efficiency review, I really at this point in time could not tell you. Since the motion has not been moved forward or passed, I've given some assistance to Councillor Coulson in drafting and wording, but that's about as far as I pushed this morning.
Okay. Councillor Gesabert?
I think we need to let CAO McRae unpack his bags, He's only recently rolled into town.
He said unpack.
Unpack.
Thought I clarified that. Thank you.
And I think Councillor Coulson is on the right track, but I'm going to make a motion that we table Councillor Coulson's motion until after we have the strategic planning session. I make that motion.
Okay, before you explain it, could we use the word defer to be consistent with our previous one?
Postpone, defer.
Postpone, defer?
Yeah.
Which one do we want? Postpone or defer?
Postpone or defer works, your worship, either or.
Pick one.
We've got two
Postpone
Okay.
until following the strategic planning session, which is now the subject of the motion tonight.
Okay, do we have a second? Second? Is that a second?
Yes.
Councillor Hain.
Can I just speak to it real quick?
Okay, discussion. Councillor Gesabert first.
No.
And Dad? Councillor Hain?
I'm going to support that. I like the motion on the table, but giving it more thought, because we don't have a director of finance right now, I think this core review will be very tough for the CAO to do anyway. And the director doesn't start until November the 1st. So let's get the strategic planning session out of the way, and then we can come back to this, with the full force, with all the staff here. I think it'll be more productive.
Councillor Neary.
I move to call the question.
Okay. assuming there's nothing substantive additionally. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so that moves that a little bit down the road. Which gets us to item 9B, Councillor Coulson. Now this is just a notice of motion in that respect, so no need to debate it here. So the motion's there on the agenda in front of us. Councillor Coulson, anything to add without getting into the debate of it?
Nope.
Okay, so there's a notice of motion with respect to recording of public meetings. Councillor Hain,
Can I ask a question?
maybe? Depends what the question is.
Well, with regards to the notice of motion, this is already a motion of the previous, it's already out there to staff to buy the recording equipment and get it up there.
Actually, hang on. It was, first off, it was in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, and second of all, we've had a discussion about strategic plan, et cetera. So I don't believe there was a direct motion for staff to act beyond the budget, was there?
Through your worship, the reason why this motion has moved to where it has is the notice of strategic plan priority action. Given that council has made reference to some concerns about the strategic plan not being of the collective, this was put on. I'll defer to the director perhaps if she has any information regarding the previous motions for council for the electronics. However, I do note it was, as Councillor Hain refers to, was placed in the budget, is my understanding.
Yeah. There was monies in the budget itself, but exactly
I think this
what it
was,
looks like.
sorry, Worship, I think this was because there were specific timelines and dates that were put on this. The budget itself exists, but we could do that whenever staff saw that we needed to do it. This gives more of a specific timeline.
Call to action.
Yes.
Basically.
And this one is-
Councillor Coulson.
This was a component of a number of things that got lumped into the communication policy too. So I don't know if it got, someone used the term drag, if it got pulled into that as well, that has been delayed.
Okay.
And do note this is only a notice of motion. Councillor Swain.
Just a real quick question. What is the preliminary phase? Like, what's the $2,000 for the preliminary phase, or is there a definition of the preliminary phase?
Sorry? Well, the
What is the
$2,000
preliminary phase?
Yeah, it was what I spent on the equipment times 10.
So that's the preliminary. So it's actually for equipment. That's $2,000.
Yeah, well, was it April? We approved $25,000 to the budget. May, sorry. At the time, I supported it, but commented on that number was ridiculous, in my opinion, and that before we actually would spend the money, we'd get another chance to vote.
Now, again, this is a notice of motion, so we could just kind of move on from it?
Yeah.
Okay. Which gets us to public participation. Mr. Parkhurst.
Jeff Parker, 6826 Harwood Drive. As an Aspengrove parent, I'd like to thank council for the exemption and realizing the benefit that the school community, and also I might add to the greater community as well. I just had a point for Will. Legal Aid Society, where does it get its money from?
Government,
Yeah,
you and me.
yeah. So I just want to point that out that just be careful of pointing out that money's going to private institutions would include the Legal Aid Society, for example.
The accountant has something against the lawyers.
No. My point is, I just want to point out that the need for consistency in your analysis, that's all. So it was a point of that.
Government's consistent now, right?
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Thank you, Mr. Parkhurst. Any additional public participation? Okay, hearing none, if we could have a motion to go in camera. Move section 91A and 91C of the community charter, moved by Councillor Swain, second by Councillor Colclough. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.